In 1974, a pound of ground beef and a can of tomato soup cost about the same as a gallon of gas. A woman with one cast-iron skillet and a cabinet full of canned goods could turn that into supper for 5 in under 30 minutes. The pork chops at number 21 needed nothing but a can of cream of celery soup and a lid. And the chicken cacciatore at number 19 filled the whole block with a smell that made neighbors slow down on the sidewalk. These were not shortcuts. These were the meals that kept families fed when one skillet and one paycheck had to stretch all week. So hit subscribe and come along, because here are 25 forgotten one-skillet dinners from the 1970s no one makes anymore. Number 25. Liver and onions. Calves liver sliced thin, dredged in seasoned flour, and dropped into a hot skillet with a tablespoon of bacon drippings. You seared it fast, maybe 2 minutes aside, until the outside turned crisp and the inside stayed pink enough to bend when you pressed it with a fork. Then you pulled the liver out, dropped a sliced yellow onion into the same fat, and cooked it low and slow until the rings went soft and golden and sweet. The liver went back on top, the lid went on, and you let it sit for another 5 minutes while the onions gave up their juice and the whole skillet turned into something that smelled like a diner at 6 in the morning. Half the country grew up eating this once a week because it was the cheapest cut at the butcher counter, and mothers believed it built strong blood. Children pushed it around the plate. Fathers cleaned theirs in 3 bites. By the 1980s, it had nearly vanished from American tables, not because anyone found a reason to stop eating it, but because the generation that cooked it stopped cooking altogether. Number 24. Salmon patties. A can of pink salmon, drained and picked clean of bones, mashed in a bowl with a beaten egg, a handful of crushed saltine crackers, diced onion, and a pinch of black pepper. You shaped the mixture into flat rounds the size of your palm, pressed firm so they held together, and laid them into a skillet with hot oil. They fried golden on each side in about 3 minutes, and when you flipped them, the kitchen filled with a smell that sat somewhere between a fish fry and a Sunday breakfast. Some families served them plain with ketchup. Others made a white sauce with butter, flour, and milk and poured it over the top. The can cost almost nothing, and one can made 4 patties, enough for 2 people with a side of canned peas and buttered bread. Coastal families and landlocked families alike kept canned salmon on the shelf for the same reason. It never spoiled, it never disappointed, and it turned into dinner in under 15 minutes without a single trip to the store. Before I go further, for the folks who want more recipes like these all in one place, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. It is a collection of the best old recipes I have covered on this channel and more. You can find it on my website vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not push it again. If you want it, it is there. Now, back to the list. Number 23. Skillet Salisbury Steak. Ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, a beaten egg, minced onion, and a dash of Worcestershire, shaped into oval patties and browned hard on both sides in the skillet. You pulled the patties out, stirred a tablespoon of flour into the drippings, poured in beef broth and a splash of ketchup, and scraped up every brown bit stuck to the bottom. The patties went back into that gravy, the lid went on, and the whole thing simmered until the sauce turned dark and thick and the meat was tender enough to cut with the side of a fork. A can of sliced mushrooms went in during the last 5 minutes if you had one. TV dinner companies sold a frozen version of this in foil trays with a compartment of mashed potatoes, but the skillet version had 3 times the meat and gravy that actually tasted like something. Families who made this never called it Salisbury steak. They called it hamburger steaks, and it showed up on the table whenever ground beef was on sale, and the house needed a meal that felt bigger than what it cost. Number 22. Eggs poached in tomato sauce. A can of whole tomatoes crushed by hand in the skillet with a diced onion, garlic, salt, pepper, and a pinch of red pepper flakes. You let the sauce simmer until it thickened, then cracked eggs right into the bubbling tomatoes and covered the pan. 5 minutes later, the whites had set and the yolks were still runny. You scooped each egg out with a spoon, dragging the thick tomato sauce with it, and laid it over a piece of toast or a slice of crusty bread. Italian grandmothers in neighborhoods across the Northeast called this eggs in purgatory. Nobody else called it anything. They just made it when the refrigerator was nearly empty and the only things left were eggs and a can of tomatoes. The yolk broke over the bread and mixed with the sauce, and that combination fed more families on more desperate nights than most people will ever know. Number 21, pork chop supper. 2 bone-in pork chops, a sliced onion, a sliced potato, and a can of cream of celery soup. You seared the chops until they had color, laid the onion and potato slices around them, poured the soup over everything, and covered the skillet. 30 minutes on a low flame and the potatoes were tender. The chops were falling off the bone, and the soup had turned into a thick gravy that coated everything in the pan. The bone-in chops were the cheapest cut at the butcher counter, and the cream of celery soup was the secret weapon that turned a plain piece of pork into something your husband asked about the next morning. No side dish needed, no salad bowl to wash. The potato was already in there, and the gravy held the whole plate together. There is something worth saying about the skillet itself. In the 1970s, most families owned one good pan, not a set, not a matching collection hanging from a rack above a marble island. One heavy skillet, usually cast iron, sometimes handed down from a mother or an aunt, seasoned with decades of bacon grease and seared onions. That skillet was not a piece of cookware. It was infrastructure. It held breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It went from stovetop to oven and back without complaint. And when a woman stood at her stove at 5:30 with 4 children circling the kitchen and a husband pulling into the driveway, she did not reach for a recipe. She reached for that skillet, because whatever went into it came out as supper. Number 20, skillet tamale pie. Ground beef browned with onion and chili powder, then a can of whole kernel corn, a can of tomato sauce, and a handful of sliced black olives stirred in. You let it simmer until the liquid reduced by half, then spooned cornmeal batter over the top in thick dollops, covered the skillet, and let the steam cook the cornmeal through. When you pulled the lid off, the batter had puffed into golden rounds sitting on top of spiced meat like dumplings on a stew. The bottom was rich and dark with chili. The top was sweet from the corn, and you ate it straight from the skillet with a big spoon. Southwestern families had been making versions of this for generations, but by the early 1970s, it had spread into suburban kitchens across the country through church cookbooks and newspaper recipe columns. A box of Jiffy cornbread mix made it even faster. The whole thing cooked in under 30 minutes, used one pan, and fed a family of 4 with enough left in the skillet for a cold lunch the next day. Number 19, chicken cacciatore. This dish started in the Italian countryside, where hunters brought home whatever bird they could find and braised it in tomatoes, onions, garlic, and whatever herbs grew outside the door. By the time it crossed the Atlantic and landed in American kitchens, it had become something else entirely. A housewife in Pittsburgh or Providence did not need a hunter or a countryside. She needed a package of chicken thighs, a can of whole tomatoes, a green pepper, an onion, and her skillet. You browned the chicken pieces in olive oil until the skin crisped, set them aside, softened the onion and pepper in the same fat, added the crushed tomatoes with a bay leaf and dried oregano, and nestled the chicken back in. Then you covered it and let the whole thing simmer for 40 minutes. The chicken fell apart in the sauce. The tomatoes thickened into something that tasted like it had been cooking since morning. The juice pooled at the bottom of the skillet, and you soaked it up with a piece of bread torn straight from the loaf. This was not a quick dinner. It was the Sunday meal that turned a kitchen into a different country. The aroma reached every room in the house, and neighbors passing on the sidewalk knew exactly what was cooking. Italian families in Brooklyn, in South Philadelphia, in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, all made their own version, and none of them wrote it down because the recipe lived in the hands, not on paper. By the late 1970s, jars of pre-made marinara started appearing on grocery store shelves, and within a decade, most people stopped making cacciatore from scratch. The jar was faster, but it never tasted like the skillet version because the skillet version had the chicken drippings in the sauce, and no jar on earth can replicate what happens when raw garlic hits hot olive oil in cast iron. Number 18, tuna noodle skillet. A can of tuna, a can of cream of mushroom soup, egg noodles, and a handful of frozen peas. You boiled the noodles in the skillet with just enough water to cook them. Stirred in the soup, the tuna, and the peas and let it bubble for 5 minutes. The peas turned bright green, the noodles turned creamy, and the whole thing came together without a single extra dish. Some families crushed potato chips on top for crunch. Others stirred in a slice of American cheese until it melted into orange ribbons through the noodles. This was the dinner you made when the pantry looked empty and you refused to admit it. A can, a box, and a bag of frozen peas fed a family of 4 and left the sink almost clean. Number 17. Beef and macaroni skillet. Ground beef browned with a chopped onion and a clove of garlic, then a can of tomato sauce and a cup of water poured straight in. You dumped a handful of dry elbow macaroni right into the pan, put the lid on, and dropped the heat. 20 minutes later, the noodles were soft and red and heavy with beef drippings. No colander, no second pot, no boiling water on the stove. The pasta cooked in the meat sauce and came out tasting like it had simmered for hours. Every grocery store in America sold elbow macaroni for pennies, and when the boxed dinner kits arrived on those same shelves a few years later, this dish quietly disappeared from weeknight tables. Not because anyone forgot how to make it, because reaching for a box was easier than remembering. Number 16. Corned beef hash. A can of corned beef broken apart with a fork, mixed with cold leftover potatoes diced small, chopped onion, salt, and pepper. You pressed the whole mixture flat into a hot skillet greased with butter and let it cook without touching it until the bottom turned into a dark, crunchy crust. Then you flipped it in sections, pressed it flat again, and let the other side crisp. The best versions had a crack of black pepper you could taste in every bite, and a crust so firm you could hear it break when a fork went through it. Diners served this with 2 fried eggs on top and a cup of coffee, but at home it was a dinner as often as a breakfast. The can sat in the pantry behind the beans and the soup, and when nothing else sounded good, someone pulled it out and had food on the table in 15 minutes. No one ever called it a recipe. You opened the can, added a potato, and made it work. Number 15. Creamed chicken on toast. Leftover chicken pulled off the bone and chopped into small pieces, stirred into a white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk, all built in the same skillet. You seasoned it with salt, pepper, and a pinch of dried thyme. Let it simmer until the sauce got thick enough to coat the back of a spoon, then ladled it over slices of toasted white bread. Some families added frozen peas during the last 2 minutes. Others stirred in a spoonful of canned mushrooms. The toast went soft underneath the cream sauce, and you ate it with a knife and fork like an open-faced sandwich that nobody would ever call fancy, but everybody would call satisfying. This was the meal that turned Sunday's leftover roast chicken into Tuesday's dinner without a single complaint from the table. Number 14. Smoked sausage and cabbage. A ring of smoked sausage sliced into thick coins, browned cut side down in the skillet until the edges crisped and the fat started to render. Then half a head of green cabbage, cut into wedges, went in with the sausage, along with a sliced onion, a splash of apple cider vinegar, and just enough water to steam everything without drowning it. The lid went on and the whole skillet cooked low for 25 minutes until the cabbage wilted down to half its size and soaked up every drop of smoky dripping from the sausage. German families in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin had eaten this for 100 years before it became a weeknight staple in kitchens that had no German heritage at all. The smell alone carried through the house and into the yard. Cabbage cost almost nothing. A head lasted most of the week in the crisper drawer, and a single ring of smoked sausage from the meat case stretched further than a pound of ground beef because the fat did double duty as seasoning. Families who grew up on this remember the sound it made when the cabbage hit the hot pan, that sharp hiss followed by the smell of vinegar catching the heat. Some added a peeled apple cut into chunks during the last 10 minutes, and the sweetness mixed with the smoke and the sour in a way that nobody could explain but everyone recognized. Others kept it plain, just the sausage and the cabbage and the onion, because that was how their mother made it, and changing the recipe felt like breaking a promise. By the time the skillet came to the table, the cabbage had turned soft and golden at the edges, the sausage coins were sticky with caramelized fat, and the onion had disappeared into the whole thing like it was never there. You ate it with rye bread if you had it, white bread if you did not, and nothing at all if the skillet was good enough on its own. And it usually was. Nobody talked about meal planning in the 1970s. There was no app, no spreadsheet, no calendar on the refrigerator with Monday through Friday color-coded by protein. There was a woman standing in front of an open cabinet at 4:30 in the afternoon, looking at what she had and deciding what it was going to become. She did not need a plan. She needed a skillet and whatever the grocery budget left behind. That kind of cooking does not have a name now because it does not need one. It was not a method. It was survival dressed up as dinner, and it worked every single night. Number 13, country fried steak. A cheap piece of round steak, pounded thin with the flat side of a meat mallet, dipped in egg and seasoned flour, and fried in the skillet until the coating turned golden and crunchy. You pulled the steak out, stirred flour into the hot drippings, poured in milk, and let it thicken into a white, peppery cream gravy. You poured it right over the top. Served with biscuits or white bread, this was the supper that small-town restaurants from Virginia to Oklahoma built their reputations on. The coating sealed in the juice, and the gravy turned the plate into something worth mopping with bread. At home, it cost almost nothing and took about 20 minutes from start to table. No cookbook required, just heat, flour, and a heavy pan. Number 12, chili mac. Ground beef, chili powder, cumin, a can of kidney beans, a can of diced tomatoes, and elbow macaroni. Everything went into the skillet in layers, and you cooked it covered until the noodles were tender and the chili had thickened around them. It tasted like two meals fused into one. The chili gave it heat and depth. The macaroni gave it weight and comfort. Children ate it without knowing they were eating beans, which for some mothers was the entire victory. A shake of shredded cheddar on top, and it was done. No slow cooker, no Dutch oven. One skillet, 20 minutes, and a meal that tasted like it had been simmering all day. The kidney beans stretched the beef, and the cumin made the whole kitchen smell like a roadside chili stand on a cold Friday night. Number 11, smothered chicken. Bone-in chicken thighs, seasoned with salt and pepper and a dusting of garlic powder, seared skin side down in the skillet until the fat rendered and the skin turned golden. Then you flipped them, poured in a mixture of chicken broth and cream of chicken soup, added sliced onions, covered the skillet, and let it simmer for 35 minutes. The chicken cooked through slowly, and the broth reduced into a thick, peppery gravy that clung to every piece. You served it over white rice or egg noodles, and the gravy soaked into everything it touched. In the Deep South, this was a church night meal, the dinner you made when the preacher was coming or when your own mother was watching. It had to be good, and it always was. Number 10, ham and potato skillet. Leftover ham diced into cubes, 2 potatoes sliced thin, and an onion cut into rings. You layered them in the skillet with a little butter, seasoned with salt and black pepper, covered it, and cooked it low until the potatoes were soft and the ham edges started to crisp. The bottom layer stuck to the pan and turned into a golden crust that everyone fought over. This was the Monday dinner that existed only because of Sunday's ham. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was purchased. The leftovers became the next meal, and the skillet made it feel intentional. Not recycled, reimagined. The crispy edges of the ham against the soft, buttery potatoes made people forget they were eating leftovers at all. Number 9, skillet chicken fried rice. Cold leftover rice, straight from the refrigerator, tossed into a screaming hot skillet with a little oil. You pressed it flat against the cast iron so the bottom layer crisped, then scrambled 2 eggs right into the pan and broke them apart through the rice. Diced leftover chicken went in next, then frozen peas and carrots, a heavy pour of soy sauce, and a few drops of sesame oil. The soy sauce hit the hot metal and the kitchen filled with steam that smelled like the takeout counter down the street. Chinese-American families had made this for generations with whatever sat in the icebox. By the 1970s, suburban cooks had learned the one secret that made it work. The rice had to be cold. Fresh rice clumped and turned to mush. Day-old rice fried clean and separate. Every grain coated in soy and oil and egg. The whole meal cost nothing extra, because every ingredient in the pan had already been bought and cooked for something else. Number 8. Skillet beef and noodles. Stew meat browned in a hot skillet, then onion and garlic softened in the drippings. A cup of beef broth went in, the lid went on, and the meat simmered for about 40 minutes until it was tender. Then you added egg noodles straight to the pan with a little more broth, let them cook through, and stirred in a spoonful of sour cream right at the end. The noodles soaked up the braising liquid and turned silky. The sour cream cut through the richness and made the whole dish taste lighter than it had any right to. This was beef stroganoff made the way families actually made it, not with fillet tips and white wine, but with whatever cheap cut was on sale and a skillet that had seen better decades. The leftovers held up overnight and tasted even better reheated the next day. Cooking alone in the 1970s did not carry the weight it carries now. A widow in that decade did not have a self-care routine or a meal delivery subscription. She had her skillet, her canned goods, and her dignity. And she cooked for herself because sitting down to a hot meal at her own table meant she was still holding her ground, not surviving, living. The skillet was the last appliance standing between a full life and an empty one. And the women who used it every night without an audience, without a compliment, without anyone noticing, were doing something quiet and radical. They were refusing to give up on themselves. Number 7. Potato and egg skillet. Leftover boiled potatoes sliced into rounds and fried in butter until the flat sides turned golden. Then 3 or 4 eggs cracked directly into the spaces between the slices. You covered the pan and let the eggs set with the lid on, the whites firming up while the yolks stayed soft. Salt, pepper, maybe a shake of paprika if the tin was within reach. Italian families called a version of this a frittata. Irish families in Boston just called it supper. The potatoes came from last night and the eggs came from the refrigerator door, and together they made a meal that felt warm and solid and complete. You cut it into wedges like a pie and served it with bread to soak up the runny yolk. No recipe card existed for this because nobody needed one. Number 6. Skillet chop suey. Ground pork or beef browned in the pan with diced onion and sliced celery, then a can of bean sprouts drained and tossed in with soy sauce, a teaspoon of cornstarch dissolved in water, and a pinch of sugar. You stirred it all together and let it cook just long enough for the sauce to thicken and glaze everything without turning the vegetables to mush. It came out in 5 minutes, served over white rice or crunchy chow mein noodles from a can. Chinese-American restaurants had been selling chop suey since the early 1900s, but the skillet version that families made at home barely resembled what came out of a restaurant kitchen. It was simpler, faster, and built entirely from what the grocery store stocked on the canned vegetable aisle. La Choy sold boxed kits with the noodles, the sauce, and the bean sprouts all in one package, and those kits sat on pantry shelves in suburbs where nobody had ever ordered takeout. The pork browned in its own fat, the celery stayed crisp, and the whole thing tasted better than it had any right to taste for something that took less time than setting the table. Number 5. Chicken and rice. Chicken thighs browned in the skillet, then set aside. Rice stirred into the drippings with a diced onion, a can of chicken broth poured over the top, the chicken laid back in on the rice, and the whole thing covered and simmered until the rice absorbed every drop of liquid. The rice at the bottom where it touched the skillet turned golden and crispy. The chicken on top stayed moist because the steam had nowhere to go. This was the meal that grandmothers measured by sound. When the bubbling stopped, dinner was ready. No timer, no thermometer. Just a woman who had been listening to that skillet her whole life and knew exactly what it sounded like when it was done. The crispy rice at the bottom was the reward for the person who served the plates and scraped the pan last. Number 4. Fried bologna dinner. Thick-cut bologna sliced from the deli counter, not the pre-packaged kind. You scored the edges so it would not curl, laid it into a hot skillet with a little oil, and fried it until the outside blistered and the center puffed up like a pillow. You put it on white bread with yellow mustard and a slice of American cheese, or you served it alongside fried potatoes cooked in the same skillet. Working families in Appalachia and across the industrial Midwest ate this without apology. It was not gourmet, it was fuel. And when you fried it right, when that outer edge went brown and crispy and the mustard soaked into the bread, there was nothing else you needed on that plate. Number 3. Skillet barbecue beef. Ground beef browned with diced onion, then ketchup, a little vinegar, brown sugar, mustard, and Worcestershire stirred through until the sauce thickened and turned dark and sticky. You simmered it uncovered for 10 minutes while the vinegar smell burned off and the sugar caramelized into the meat. The whole kitchen smelled like a backyard grill even though nobody had stepped outside. You spooned it onto hamburger buns or white bread, piled high enough that the top slice slid sideways, and ate it with a napkin in your other hand. Church fellowship halls served this from electric skillets at potluck suppers. School cafeterias ladled it onto trays next to canned corn. Families made it at home on Friday nights when the budget was tight, but the table still needed something that tasted like the weekend had arrived. Number 2. Skillet hash brown and egg bake. Frozen hash browns spread flat in the skillet with a little butter, cooked until the bottom turned golden and crunchy. Then you cracked 4 eggs right on top, scattered diced ham or crumbled sausage between them, covered the skillet, and let the eggs set. Salt, pepper, maybe a few shakes of hot sauce. This was breakfast for dinner, and in the 1970s nobody apologized for it. A single skillet held the starch, the protein, and the fat, and the whole thing went to the table in the pan it was cooked in. Children did not care that the eggs were on top of hash browns instead of next to toast. They ate it because it was hot, it was salty, and nobody told them it was not a real dinner. The bottom crust of the hash browns, golden and buttery where it stuck to the cast iron, was the part worth scraping. Number 1. Skillet chicken and rice. Bone-in chicken legs seasoned with salt, pepper, and a little paprika, browned in the skillet until the skin was dark and crispy. You set the chicken aside, softened diced onion and a clove of garlic in the drippings, then stirred in long-grain white rice until every grain was coated in fat. A can of chicken broth and a can of water went in. The chicken went back on top, the lid went on, and the whole thing cooked together on low heat for 30 minutes. When you lifted the lid, the rice had absorbed every drop of broth and the chicken was tender to the bone. The grains nearest the bottom had turned golden and crunchy where they pressed against the cast iron. Children fought over those crispy bottom pieces. This was not a recipe that came from a cookbook. It came from watching someone else make it, and that someone learned from the person before her. Every country in the world has a version of chicken and rice, and every version starts the same way, with whatever bird you could afford and whatever grain kept in the pantry. In the 1970s, it cost almost nothing to make, and it fed a family of 4 from a single skillet without a single side dish. The house smelled like Sunday dinner on a Tuesday budget, and the plate looked generous even when the grocery money was nearly gone. That is what a skillet could do. Not convenience, not speed, dignity. Creamed peas on buttered toast was one of those meals that whispered instead of shouted. It never tried to impress anyone. It was made for quiet nights, empty fridges, and long weeks. Grandma would melt a little butter in a pan, add canned peas, sometimes drained, sometimes not, and stir in milk and a bit of flour or cornstarch to thicken it. Salt, pepper, maybe a dash of sugar if the peas were too sharp. Then she would ladle the warm, creamy mix over thick slices of buttered toast. It was soft, it was mild, it was the edible version of a warm blanket. Nobody bragged about it, and no one ever asked for seconds out loud, but the plate was always clean by the end. It was a meal that held your hand, quietly filled you up, and gave you the strength to keep going. In some homes, it was the only hot food all week, and even if you had fancier ingredients or a longer grocery list, you still came back to this because it made you feel like a kid again. Just peas and bread and time. That was more than enough. Mock chicken legs, a true culinary illusion of the Great Depression. When actual chicken legs were too expensive to buy, people had to get creative, crafting drumsticks out of inexpensive cuts of meat like pork or veal and shaping them to look like the real thing. These so-called legs were then breaded, fried, or baked and served up with high hopes that no one would notice the difference. And honestly, in times as hard as those, nobody even cared which meat they were having, as long as it tasted good and filled you up. The beauty of mock chicken legs is that for a split second, you would forget that it wasn't an actual chicken leg on your plate, rather something that resembled one. It was a brilliant way for families to serve something that felt like a treat without the high cost. Plus, let's give a shout out to all those women who shaped that meat to look like a drumstick. That takes a certain level of dedication. It's a testament to how far people were willing to go to make ends meet while still putting something fun on the table. Mock chicken legs became household favorites, proving that with a little creativity in the kitchen, you could really stretch that budget. Celery and cheese soufflé brought elegance to an inexpensive vegetable that most people considered only a snack or soup ingredient. Finely chopped celery was sautéed with a bit of butter and folded into a fluffy base of beaten eggs and grated cheese before being baked until the top rose and browned. Despite its sophisticated appearance, the ingredients were simple and affordable, making it a popular choice for dinner parties on a budget. The soufflé delivered a gentle crunch from the celery against the airy texture of the eggs, surprising guests who expected something plain. Because the recipe relied on pantry staples like milk, eggs, and a small amount of cheese, it fit perfectly into the frugal cooking philosophy of the time. Home cooks loved that it felt fancy without requiring costly ingredients or specialized equipment. Served with a crisp salad or a slice of toasted bread, this dish turned an ordinary evening into a special occasion and demonstrated how a humble vegetable could take center stage in a memorable meal. Dandelion green salad was probably one of the most resourceful dishes to come out of the Great Depression era. The Great Depression was the worst economic downfall in the United States history. The stock market crashed in October 1929, and that marked the beginning of the end for some people. From October 1929 till the end of 1930, America was at a standstill. It's needless to say, people had a hard time putting food on the table while still trying to keep the family members healthy and happy. So, when money was tight and grocery shopping wasn't an option, people had to turn to their own gardens for some free food. You might be thinking to yourself, is there another type of dandelion that I do not know about? And the answer is no, just your regular grow-in-the-park dandelion. What most of us right now consider a park flower or a pesky weed, people considered a nutritious and, even more important, free source of greens back in the day. Dandelions may have a bit of a bitter bite, but you had to work with what nature gave you. So adding some salt and vinegar was a must. And that's all it took to turn these lawn invaders into a Great Depression-era salad. Families would head out with baskets and pick out an enormous amount of dandelions. So, with no grocery list and no checkout lines, people went out and got their ingredients. But hey, not only did they stretch the food budget, but they also kept their lawns clean and fresh. Talk about multitasking. There were two things nearly every kitchen had back then: creamed corn and hot dogs. When both of them landed in the same skillet, dinner was practically done. This was the kind of meal Grandma made when time was short and kids were restless. She would slice the hot dogs into little coins and toss them into a buttered pan until they browned just right around the edges. Then came the creamed corn, thick, sweet, and silky from the can. It all got mixed together into a bubbling, golden mess that looked questionable to some but tasted like warm security. You could eat it on its own, spoon it over bread, or mop it up with the last slice of toast from breakfast. Nobody called it gourmet, but everyone called it dinner. It filled your belly, cleaned out the pantry, and gave you one less thing to worry about. And somehow, it was the meal that lingered in memory more than any roast or fancy casserole. Maybe it was the smell. Maybe it was how fast it came together. Or maybe it was just that it tasted better when you were young, hungry, and too impatient to wait for something fancier. Hamburger rice skillet pie demonstrated the 1960s knack for stretching a pound of meat to feed a crowd. Ground beef was cooked with onions, peppers, and a generous helping of cooked rice before being spread in a skillet or shallow casserole. A biscuit dough topping, brushed with milk for shine, transformed the humble filling into a pie that looked more luxurious than its ingredients suggested. By combining inexpensive rice with a small amount of meat, families could create a dish that was both hearty and economical, perfect for busy weeknights. The biscuit layer soaked up the savory juices as it baked, giving each slice a comforting blend of flavors and textures. Many homemakers wrote this recipe on index cards to keep near the stove because it could be made entirely from pantry staples. Children enjoyed the fluffy crust and mild seasoning, while parents appreciated how it filled plates without emptying wallets. This skillet pie remained a dependable favorite for decades because it embodied practicality without sacrificing taste or warmth at the dinner table. Vegetable pot pie was proof that you didn't need meat to make a satisfying meal. When times were tough and the meat was either too pricey or just plain unavailable, families turned to the next best thing: vegetables. Awful alternative for all of us who hate veggies, but you had to do what you had to do just to get by. The humble pot pie, traditionally packed with chicken or beef, took a vegetable-only turn during the Great Depression. It consisted of hearty vegetables like potatoes, carrots, peas, and some onions. Vegetable pot pie was a filling, flavorful dish that still gave you that comforting feeling of a homemade meal. And nobody here can even imagine what that must have felt like. When all you ate were just scraps of whatever you could find, getting a vegetable pot pie must have felt like getting a roasted steak. Plus, it was a great way to use up whatever was in the garden or on sale at the market. No meat? No problem. Those veggies could stand their ground. Cooking a vegetable pot pie wasn't only about stretching the budget, it was also about creativity. You could throw in whatever comes to mind and call it dinner. If you, by some miraculous chance, got any canned tuna, that would go in there also. And let's be honest, upon cracking open that golden crust, it didn't matter what lay inside. It only mattered that you had food on the table. Sloppy Joes had already earned their place in the American kitchen by the time Grandma figured out how to make them faster. Instead of hamburger buns, she grabbed slices of toast. Whatever white sandwich bread was left in the bread box. Ground beef got tossed into the skillet with a little onion, then drowned in a quick mix of ketchup, mustard, and a pinch of sugar if you had it. No special seasonings, no packets, no fuss. Once the mixture was bubbling, it got spooned right over the toast and served just like that, open-faced, hot, and ready to fall apart in your hands. That was half the fun. It dripped, it stained your fingers, and it always tasted better the messier it was. This was a dinner for families who were too tired to sit proper but still wanted to eat together. It was loud, quick, and honest. And even though it came from a time of tight belts and short patience, it tasted like something you might pay good money for at a diner today. That is the thing about Sloppy Joe toast. It always fed more than just your stomach. Stuffed tomato boats floated right into many mid-century cookbooks as a budget-friendly way to transform fresh produce into a satisfying dinner. Large tomatoes were carefully hollowed and filled with a mixture of cooked rice, finely chopped celery, onion, and a light drizzle of mayonnaise dressing for moisture. Sometimes a sprinkle of paprika or a handful of breadcrumbs was added on top for color and texture. This simple combination delivered a surprising amount of flavor and a pleasing balance between the juicy tomato walls and the warm rice filling. Home cooks appreciated how the recipe allowed them to use leftover rice and vegetables, reducing waste while creating something pretty enough for company. In summer months, when gardens overflowed with ripe tomatoes, these stuffed boats provided a refreshing alternative to heavier casseroles. They were served chilled for a cool supper or lightly baked when the weather turned cold, proving their versatility across the seasons. Their bright presentation made them a standout dish for picnics, church potlucks, or a light Friday night family meal. This was not just a baked bean and hot dog dinner. This was the working family's answer to hunger, chaos, and a kitchen clock that never slowed down. Grandma would take a can of baked beans, thick, sweet, and molasses dark, and heat it slowly on the stove. Then came the franks, sliced into coins and tossed in until they plumped up like little balloons. Sometimes she would add a spoonful of brown sugar or a shake of mustard, but most nights she just stirred and served. It was hot, sticky, smoky, and completely effortless. The beans coated the franks like syrup over pancakes, and it went best with a buttered slice of toast or a side of cornbread if the oven was already warm. Kids would gobble it down in minutes. Grown-ups would sigh, eat quietly, and go back for seconds. It was the kind of stovetop magic that made do with what you had and somehow made it taste better than it should. You never forgot the smell. And even if you rolled your eyes when she made it, you would ask for it again once life got harder and you needed something easy. That is what made it a keeper. Buttermilk potato pancakes were a beloved solution for leftover mashed potatoes and a shining example of kitchen thrift in mid-century America. Cold mashed potatoes were combined with tangy buttermilk, a beaten egg, and a bit of flour to create a batter that fried up into golden cakes with crisp edges and fluffy centers. Served hot from the griddle, these pancakes paired beautifully with applesauce, sour cream, or a simple sprinkle of salt and pepper. The recipe offered a new life to yesterday's potatoes, ensuring that nothing in the kitchen went to waste. Families welcomed the comforting aroma that filled the house as the pancakes cooked, making even an ordinary weeknight feel special. They were hearty enough to stand alone as supper, but also worked well alongside a small slice of ham or a bowl of vegetable soup. Easy to make and quick to cook, these pancakes became a regular part of many 1960s dinner rotations and remain a reminder that frugality can be delicious when handled with care and creativity. This one came straight out of the open the pantry and hope for a miracle school of cooking. Scrambled eggs with canned chili was never in any cookbook, but it made it onto plates across America faster than most 5-ingredient dinners. Grandma would beat a few eggs with whatever milk she had left, toss them in a skillet, and stir them just until they were barely set. Then came the chili, straight from the can, full of beans and spice and a little bit of mystery meat. It would warm right on top of the eggs until the kitchen smelled like a diner on a slow afternoon. A few slices of toast on the side, maybe a wedge of cheese if you were lucky, and you had yourself a meal. It was hearty, messy, and completely satisfying. No one asked what brand the chili was or whether the eggs were farm fresh. What mattered was that it was hot, filling, and on the table in 10 minutes. It was meals like this that made it possible to get through the rest of the week. And once you have eaten it once, you will understand why it never needed a recipe. Savory oatmeal bake proved that oats could be far more than a breakfast cereal, and that inexpensive pantry staples could hold their own at supper time. Rolled oats were mixed with diced onions, shredded cheese, beaten eggs, and a dash of black pepper, then baked until the top formed a golden crust. The result was a hearty loaf with a texture similar to meatloaf, but without the expense of beef. This dish allowed families to stretch their budgets while still offering a warm and filling dinner that paired well with a simple green salad or sliced tomatoes from the backyard garden. Cooks loved that the recipe welcomed additions like leftover vegetables or small bits of ham, making it an adaptable way to clear the refrigerator. Children often enjoyed the mild, nutty flavor, and leftovers could be sliced and reheated for breakfast the next morning. It embodied the frugal creativity of 1960s kitchens, where a bag of oats and a little cheese could become a main course worth serving to guests without apology. Staying on the theme of no waste or zero waste, whatever you prefer to call it, we've got ourselves split pea soup with ham. When money was tight and meat was a luxury, even the humble ham bone found new life as the star of this hearty dish. Toss it into a pot of split peas, and you've got yourself a soup that could feed the whole family for days. The magic of the soup wasn't in the peas, but in the leftover ham bone, which gave the soup that smoky, rich flavor you could ask for without actually needing any meat. That right there is kitchen creativity at its finest, bringing out every bit of goodness out of something that might have otherwise been thrown away. As the peas simmer and break down, the ham bone starts working its magic and releases all the flavors into the broth. If you were one of the lucky ones, you would catch a few small bits of meat still clinging to it. But never mind if you didn't, the bone still did its job. Grilled cheese and pineapple sandwiches were one of Grandma's best-kept secrets, the kind of meal that made you raise an eyebrow right before you fell in love with it. It started like any grilled cheese, with slices of bread and whatever cheese was available. But right before the second slice went on, she would place a canned pineapple ring right in the middle of the sandwich. Then it all went into the skillet with butter hissing underneath. The cheese melted, the pineapple softened, the bread crisped to a golden crunch. The end result? a sandwich that was both savory and sweet, crispy and juicy. It was like dinner and dessert in one bite, and it somehow worked better than anyone expected. She made it on Fridays, or on days when the pantry was almost bare, but the craving for something different was strong. The smell of warm pineapple and browned butter filled the house and lingered even after the dishes were done. Kids loved it. Grown-ups pretended they did not, until they asked for seconds. It was quick, clever, and full of unexpected joy. Just like her. Green bean croquettes brought new life to leftover vegetables, turning them into crispy patties that satisfied even the pickiest eaters. Cooked green beans were mashed with breadcrumbs, a beaten egg, and a sprinkle of herbs, then shaped into small rounds and pan-fried until golden on the outside and soft within. This dish allowed thrifty homemakers to stretch a handful of beans into a full meal, pairing perfectly with a dollop of ketchup or a simple white sauce. Children loved the crunch, and parents appreciated the low cost and quick preparation time. Green bean croquettes also demonstrated the growing influence of European cooking techniques in American kitchens, where frying and breadcrumb coatings were becoming increasingly popular. Served alongside a salad or a scoop of mashed potatoes, they brought variety and texture to the dinner table without adding strain to the grocery budget. Their lasting charm lies in the way they prove that even the simplest leftovers can be turned into something special when treated with care and creativity. Beans and rice, a dynamic duo that has been filling up bellies for generations. In lean times, this combination was a nutritional powerhouse with protein, carbs, and plenty of flavor, all without costing much. When money was tight, beans and rice were the way to go. They were cheap, filling, and could stretch to feed a whole family with just a few basic ingredients. Another great thing about this meal is its versatility. Got any spices lying around? Throw them in. A sad, lonely veggie waiting to be declared garbage? Throw it in too. It is the meal that will adapt to whatever you had in the house, not the other way around. It always manages to come out tasting like you put more effort into it than you did. Plus, let's be real. When you've got a pot of beans simmering away and some rice cooking on the side, it smells like home, which is what people at the time desperately needed to be reminded of. The beauty of bean and rice is that it is not just a survival meal, it is a comfort food packed with nutrition. Ham and applesauce might sound fancy today, but back in the day it was just something Grandma could throw together before the table was even set. Sliced ham went straight into a hot skillet, sometimes with just a dab of butter or the leftover fat from breakfast. A quick sear on each side was all it needed. Meanwhile, the applesauce, homemade if you had a backyard tree, canned if you were in a hurry, was warming on the back burner. This was dinner you could smell from the front porch. The saltiness of the ham played off the soft, tart sweetness of the apples in a way that felt balanced, simple, and oddly comforting. It was a meal for days when you were tired, when groceries were thin, or when you just needed something that felt familiar. And the best part? No oven. No long wait. Just a skillet, a spoon, and a little heat. Folks might not talk about ham and applesauce as a main course anymore, but for a generation raised on wartime thrift and flavor that did not waste time, this was a weeknight miracle. If you ever needed proof that sweet and salty go hand in hand, here it is. Carrot ring with cream sauce was a clever way for thrifty home cooks of the 1960s to turn a humble root vegetable into the centerpiece of a family meal. Grated carrots were blended with breadcrumbs, eggs, and a hint of nutmeg before being poured into a decorative bundt mold that gave the dish an almost festive look when unmolded. Once baked until lightly browned, the ring was served with a simple white sauce made from milk and a spoon of flour whisked with butter. This meal brought brightness to the dinner table while keeping costs low because carrots were inexpensive and available year-round. Many mothers appreciated how this dish sneaked extra vegetables into the diets of children who might otherwise turn up their noses at plain carrots. The creamy sauce provided a smooth contrast to the tender crumb of the ring and made it feel more indulgent than its price suggested. Guests at church potlucks and neighbors at block parties often requested the recipe, helping it spread across American suburbs and small towns alike. When fresh veggies were hard to come by, this simple, affordable dish made its way onto many kitchen tables. Creamed peas on toast. Yuck! Sounds terrible to me, but maybe some of you will disagree. In hard times, this was the go-to meal for families looking for something hearty without draining the pantry. Canned peas, some butter, flour, and milk, and you had yourself a creamy sauce that could turn a humble slice of toast into a meal. I know it doesn't sound glamorous, but creamed peas on toast were the purest form of comfort. You didn't need fancy ingredients or hours of prep time. Toss the peas in a quick white sauce, pour it over toast, and voila, dinner is served. It was filling and warm, with just the right amount of creamines to make you forget that it was actually a can of peas and a piece of toast. Creamed peas on toast came with a great bonus. It was quick to prepare, making it ideal for those nights when you were hungry but didn't have much to work with. It won't win you any culinary awards, but creamed peas on toast was a no-fuss comfort food that got the job done. Bologna and egg scramble was the go-to dinner when breakfast never quite happened and lunch was already a blur. It started with slices of bologna, thick and pink and curled at the edges, hitting the hot pan with a sizzle. Grandma would brown them until they crisped at the edges, then crack in a few eggs and give it all a quick scramble. No measuring, no garnish, just protein and grease and flavor. Sometimes she would add a little shredded cheese if she had some, but it was not necessary. This was about getting food on the table without making it a project. The bologna gave the eggs a smoky, salty edge, and the eggs softened everything just enough to go down easy. Served in bowls, over toast, or straight from the skillet, no one ever walked away hungry. It was simple, dependable, and tasted a whole lot fancier than it had any right to. You could make it in 10 minutes, clean up in 5, and be done with the day before the sun went down. Some meals were special because they were rare. This one was special because it was always there. Apple sausage bread. Pudding married sweet and savory flavors in a way that perfectly captured the experimental spirit of the 1960s kitchen. Day-old bread cubes soaked up a custard of milk and eggs before being mixed with diced apples and small bits of sausage for richness. The dish baked until the top turned golden and the apples released their gentle perfume, filling the home with an inviting scent. By using stale bread and modest amounts of meat, thrifty cooks created a dinner that felt both indulgent and practical. The sweetness of the fruit balanced the smoky sausage, while the custard kept every bite moist. Families often served it with a simple green salad for contrast or a drizzle of maple syrup when they wanted extra sweetness. This recipe highlighted the era's willingness to blend unexpected flavors while keeping costs low. Leftovers reheated beautifully for breakfast the next day, making it a true two-meal wonder that reflected the frugal yet inventive cooking style of mid-century American households. While we're on the topic of rice, my personal favorite, rice pudding. A sweet reminder that nothing should go to waste, especially not leftover rice. In the era of the Great Depression, where every rice grain was counted, families found a way to turn yesterday's leftover dinner into today's sweet dessert. Rice pudding became the ultimate budget-friendly treat, transforming something simple into something comforting and sweet with just a little sugar, milk, and a dash of cinnamon if you were feeling particularly fancy. I know leftover rice seems kind of blah, but once it simmers into something that looks and smells like pudding, you'll forget what you were even talking about. Plus, it was an easy way to turn ingredients you had into something new, which saved you money and a trip to the store. It felt like a real treat even in lean times, and that's why it was so popular among families. A warm bowl of rice pudding could brighten up the end of any meal, turning frugality into a moment of indulgence. So even though it started as a way to cut food waste, it stayed a family favorite that warmed up even the coldest hearts in those freezing times. Salmon patties with saltine crumbs were a classic end-of-the-week dinner, the kind of meal you made when the fridge looked sad and the meat was long gone. Canned salmon was a miracle in itself, cheap, shelf-stable, and packed with enough protein to make you feel like you had not missed a step. Grandma would mix it up with crushed saltine crackers, a beaten egg, and maybe a sprinkle of onion or celery if there was any left. She would form them into small patties and fry them in the same pan that had seen 5 meals already. The result? Golden, crispy outsides with soft, savory centers. They had just enough flavor to make you forget they came from a can and not the sea. Served with peas or creamed corn, or just a dollop of mayonnaise on the side, it was the kind of humble meal that never needed applause. It showed up quietly, did its job, and vanished without complaint. But it left everyone full and just a little more hopeful. That is what dinner was supposed to do. Not impressed, not sparkle, just comfort. And that is exactly what these little salmon cakes delivered. Cornflake-crusted fish squares were a playful answer to the challenge of making inexpensive whitefish appealing to the whole family. Thin fillets of cod or haddock were cut into squares, dipped in milk and egg, and coated with crushed cornflakes left over from breakfast. Baking or frying turned the cereal coating into a crisp, golden crust that sealed in moisture and added a gentle sweetness. This recipe allowed households to use affordable frozen fish while giving it a texture reminiscent of more expensive fried seafood. Children found the crunchy coating irresistible, and parents enjoyed how quickly the dish came together on busy weeknights. The cornflakes acted as an economical substitute for breadcrumbs and made use of pantry items that might otherwise go stale. Served with a squeeze of lemon or a side of tartar sauce, these fish squares brought a fun and frugal twist to the dinner table, showing the inventive spirit of 1960s cooking where nothing in the kitchen ever went to waste. Starting off strong with peanut butter soup. Yes, you heard me right, peanut butter soup. This dish shows just how creative some people were at that time. How could someone even get that idea? You might be wondering. Well, allow me to explain. In the Great Depression era, meat had become quite expensive to bring home. Stretching the budget had become a daily challenge, but peanut butter stepped in. It was rich in protein and full of flavor. This simple ingredient, transformed into a hearty soup, could feed the entire family without breaking the bank. I know it sounds weird. A soup made out of the same peanut butter you'd usually spread on toast. It seems unusual, but when times were tough, it was a genius way to get in some much-needed protein. I don't know about you, but I would definitely try it. It has a bit of charm. A touch of sweetness here, a hint of savory there, and boom! There you have a soup that will keep you fed and happy. It was a good way to use up any odds and ends you had lying around the house. Some onions, peas, rice, or potatoes. Anything you had would serve well once it touched that peanut butter heaven. Peanut butter and bacon sounds like a dare today, but to Grandma, it was just Tuesday lunch. This was a sandwich born in the tail end of the Great Depression and carried proudly into the next decade by people who knew how to stretch every ingredient. She would fry up strips of bacon until they crackled, drain them on the same paper towel she used all week, then lay them across a thick spread of peanut butter on white sandwich bread. That was it. No lettuce, no tomato, no fancy mayonnaise. Just salt, fat, protein, and speed. Kids loved the crunch. Grown-ups loved how it filled you up without burning through the grocery budget. And for something so strange-sounding, it just worked. The warmth of the bacon softened the peanut butter slightly, and the two came together like old friends who had nothing in common but always got along. Sometimes she would add a second slice of bread, but often it was open-faced and served cold. It was portable, practical, and surprisingly satisfying. And in homes where time was short and mouths were many, that counted for everything. You might laugh at it now, but one bite would probably bring it all back. The pea and egg salad plate was a thrifty supper that turned humble staples into a refreshing main dish for a warm evening. Canned peas were drained and chilled before being folded with chopped hard-boiled eggs, diced celery, and a splash of mild vinegar dressing. A pinch of dry mustard or a spoon of mayonnaise added just enough richness to bind everything together while still keeping the cost low. Served on crisp lettuce leaves or alongside sliced tomatoes from the backyard garden, it provided protein and texture without any need for meat. Home cooks loved how quickly it came together using pantry items that were inexpensive and easy to find year-round. Children enjoyed the gentle sweetness of the peas, while adults appreciated the subtle tang from the dressing. This simple combination was light enough for summertime, but filling enough to carry a family through a busy evening, reflecting the practical yet creative spirit of mid-century kitchens, where canned vegetables and eggs formed the backbone of many dependable weeknight meals. Quick tomato and rice soup was less of a recipe and more of a family habit. It started with canned tomato soup, the kind that came in a red and white can and waited patiently in your pantry for its moment. Instead of milk or water, Grandma would stir in leftover rice from the night before, just a scoop or two, enough to bulk it up and stretch it across the whole table. The rice gave it body, the soup gave it flavor, and together they made something more than the sum of their parts. It simmered on the stove while she folded laundry or paid bills at the kitchen table. It was the smell that told you dinner was ready, not the clock. No one complained that it was simple. In fact, that was the point. You could top it with cheese, swirl in a bit of cream, or eat it plain with saltines on the side. Whatever the case, it went down smooth, warmed you up fast, and made a long day feel less heavy. It might not win any ribbons, but it won over every empty stomach it ever met. Raisin rice. Pilaf proved that a meatless dinner could still feel special and satisfying when handled with care. White rice was simmered slowly with a bit of butter until each grain was tender, then tossed with plump raisins that had been soaked in warm water to bring out their natural sweetness. A pinch of cinnamon or nutmeg added gentle spice, turning plain rice into a fragrant dish that filled the kitchen with an inviting aroma. Many 1960s households served this pilaf as a main course on nights when meat was too expensive, or saved it for church suppers where a simple vegetarian option was welcome. It paired beautifully with a crisp green salad or a side of baked apples, creating a balanced meal from inexpensive ingredients. Leftovers reheated well for breakfast with a drizzle of honey or a splash of milk. The dish showed how a few pantry staples could stretch a grocery budget and proved that even the simplest ingredients could deliver comfort and a hint of elegance at the dinner table. One-Skillet, 25 dinners. Every single one of them can still be made tonight with whatever is already sitting in your kitchen. Cook one you have not thought about in years. Sit at the table, even if nobody else is there. Then tell me in the comments which one brought something back. Was it the pork chops your mother covered and forgot about for half an hour? Was it the cacciatore that made the neighbors slow down? Or was it the hash browns and eggs that nobody complained about? Whatever it was, the skillet still works. Thank you for watching. There is more on this channel, and I will see you in the next one.